Good morning. It's Chris Gio from Merchant Method, and today I wanted to take the hour to really explore a new way to work from home. It has changed, the way that we work is changing, and how we evaluate things, of course, is changing moment to moment based on what we have visibility to, based on our environment, and based on how everything in our environment is changing moment to moment. And so I thought it would be a great time to re-explore what it looks like to craft your own work from home playbook. I'm not an optimization expert. I am not someone who is going to tell you to work in one way or another. I'm simply a person who's trying to help us understand how each of us as individuals can personalize this experience. Because as many people as there are required to or choosing to work from home right now, there are as many styles. And when you add people into the mix of your home, those styles multiply. And it's my hope that over our time together, we're going to get a chance to share ideas and put context around how you currently work from home. So hopefully not a ton of new ideas, but different ways to think through the tools and the skill set that you already have. All right. So if you are joining me live, or if you're even watching the replay, I'd love to know, just tell me, if you work from home or work remotely on a day-to-day typical basis, type 1. If you rarely work from home or are new to working from home, go ahead and type 2. I'd love to know. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. So we know that working from home is changing with the times, and it is important for us, and I invite you to, in the same way I invited myself, is everything's changing. Let's rethink how we work from home because the circumstances are different, and we're going to talk through some of the mindset things, some of the ways that we evaluate things, how they change, and it's a fantastic opportunity for us to rethink it. Now, I've seen all the memes, and I'm sure you have too, and they're memes for a reason. You get to decide if you want to operate in a really similar way that you've been operating before we've been required to or asked to work from home. If you want to forego it altogether, say for example, you are a small business owner or a solo owner operator and you want to take the time to retreat, and anywhere in between that spectrum, the memes are if you want to work, if you want to self-care, if you want to be in pajamas and watch Netflix all day, do that. It's changing and you are absolutely allowed to decide what's right for you. Now, these are some ideas and some things that I want to explore if perhaps you are required by the work that you do or the community that you want to support, if you are required to deliver on accountabilities. I know that so many of you have children at home, and that really impacts our ability to slide up and down the scale of how it is that we want to respond personally. And so, again, there's so many ways to work, and hopefully these ideas will help you figure out how you want to do it. I would love to know, and feel free to share, what are ways that you've decided to change how you work from home? I'll share some of the ways that I've changed and how I've decided to work from home differently. I've also actually invited one other person to join us and be a roommate, and that's my sister. I've invited her to stay with us during this stay home period because we have the capacity for Wi-Fi. We have extra computer monitors and surfaces for us all to work. So as you share a little bit about yourself with me, because I would really love to know your frequency of working from home prior to stay home, how work is changing. I'll tell you about myself. I've been in the workforce for over 20 years, and I'd say in about 2012, I launched a very small business, a micro business, if you will. And I support other small businesses. And even though I've been working from home on and off since 2012, the game has changed. This is my family. Down here on the right, this is my family, 2 kids, a 12-year-old who is in middle school and a 7-year-old who's in elementary school. And I met my husband when we were in college, babies. So these are my cuties. And though I've been working from home on and off since 2012 and very consistently for 3 years, the name of my game shifted dramatically in September. I happen to have a child who is on the autism spectrum, and in this transition from elementary school to middle school, you stay-at-home moms, like full on and homeschool moms, full on props to you. I had a lot of catching up to work on, even though I have been highly involved in my children's life. I'm going to give a quick shout out to Jen. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have thoughts and insights, please post and comment. I would love it. Let's see if I can get this. Oh, look, Jen, thank you. I can call up these comments on my screen, which I love. So in September, I decided to actually work on my business and craft it in a way that was part-time, so I can spend the other half of my time helping support his transition into a new way of managing through some executive functioning skills, organizational skills, study skills. And it really put a lot of work to challenge myself in how to work differently from home. And a lot of the things that I'm using to guide the way that I personalize my own work from home schedule in this moment, I've learned quite recently. And, I share this simply because some of these were hard-earned lessons. And if we can learn from each other, I think the better. So that's my fam. How many of you are working from home with more than just yourself? I would love to know if you can just type in the comments whenever you are watching this, how many there are, and if you have children at home. Okay, because the name of the game is changing, we have to rethink a few things. And I love a good mnemonic. I love ways to remind myself in the moment, in the heat of the moment, when I lose my patience. Easy things to remember. And so this is what I offer to you, because this is what I have created for myself. Sight, support, signals. Say it with me in your head. Sight, support, and signals. So I think the first thing we should do is explore sight. And what I mean by sight really specifically is a line of sight and how we see things and our perspective. So probably we see ourselves with all of the levels of responsibility that we have. And depending on the role that you have and the roles that you have, I know that so many of us have intersectional roles, and they are really crossing over right now in a way that maybe they don't as intensely as they are now. They're crossing over, and I'm inviting you, as I've invited myself, is that our circumstances have changed, and as such, I think that our personal expectations of how we see ourselves, how we see our relationships with other people, how we see our relationships with work, should change accordingly, because we do not have the same line of sight. All the tools that we might be used to using, the processes, the accountabilities, the way we interact with other people at work, the way we interact with our clients or our users or our families or our students or support teams that help keep your world afloat, all of it has changed, and things continue to change moment to moment. And because our visibility has significantly narrowed and shortened in both breadth and depth, wouldn't it make sense that we also rethink our personal expectations of our professional performance as well as our performance as just a person moving through life? Have you done that? I always am interested in hearing and learning how people are changing their expectations and setting maybe more realistic expectations as the line of sight changes. If you have a team and you are working with a team of collaborators or even a team that reports into you, communicating early, consistently, often is really, really important on one end, but also knowing the way that everyone's using their time or their sense of time is also asynchronous, right? So they might not be as available at the same time that you are. So finding that in between of communicating and over communicating and knowing that it's asynchronous or not synced up at exactly the right time is one way to help manage personal expectations for yourself, for the people around you, and for your teams. That is sight. The next thing we should think about is rethinking support. In this, like, I heart you and everything that supports us. When it comes to working from home, we often think about support as in community support or neighborly support. I also want us to be thinking about environmental support. And how can you reimagine your home environment, the physical things around you, to support your current needs, your needs not just for living, but also for working. So if you're not a professional stay-at-home person, you may not be set up to work from home as many hours as you are. Whether that means something that could be as ergonomically reflective as something you have, say, in a co-working space or in a cube or in an office, or even access to things like printer paper and printer toner. These are the kinds of things to think about. So let me share an example. And if you have an example of how you've reimagined your home environment to support your needs, type them in the comments. I'd love to know. So with 4 of us at this moment, really taxing the Wi-Fi and needing to print out documents, one of the things that we needed to negotiate is where the printer is. And we don't often think about optimizing. And this whole intention of me coming forward to share and to learn from you is not at all about optimizing. This is about getting started and getting started in a way that really fits and suits your needs. But one of the challenges was printing, and I have a loud printer in a space where someone's holding conference calls with real needs for privacy, confidentiality, like legal needs for privacy and confidentiality. And so opening and closing the door to get those papers doesn't work. And so simply, thinking through negotiating, keep the door open when we can come in and print, close the door when we can't. We just moved the printer. Setting up surfaces so multiple people can work, that's really, really important. I even think back through some of the things that I really learned about creating an environment that triggers. So now we're starting to think through some of the neuro-linguistic programming associated with optimal behavior, not just for yourself, but for cueing the people around you. Some of those things really include designating a space or a few spaces for which you will work. So we've got one person in our family that's got 2 screens sitting in one part of the house, another person in our family who's set up in half the dining room table with a big computer screen and a laptop. I've got 2 spaces because half the time I am navigating guidance through a school type schedule and me needing to work. This setting up in a space helps us understand how to wrap up the work when we're done, to physically shut it down. Now, I think we underestimate the shutting it down piece. It's so important because it's quite easy for life and work to blend if we're not shutting down completely. And so that's another example of environmental supports. So I just thought I'd share that. The third thing to rethink, right? So we thought about sight as in line of sight, support as how can your environment support you, signals. One of the things that we are so used to when we work face to face with people are these subtleties of the social cues. What does the face look like? The body stance. what is happening around us. A lot of environmental things actually encourage conversation, encourage questions, and in large part, in the way that we interact with people that we are no longer close to, that changes. That's where video comes in. And the way that we relate to the new people in our home is different. And so I'd invite you, as I've invited myself, we're going to relate to people differently. Look for those different signals. We're going to relate to ourselves differently. If we haven't level set our own expectations and our expectations remain really, really high, we might not actually have really good self-esteem. And so the subtleties of these micro cues, these micro signals from the people around us are really, really critical. And it's okay to sit down and chat about what new signals look like. It's almost as if moving in again into a new environment and with the roommates you may currently have. And for me, roommates, when I say roommates loosely, I mean my life partner, my children, and my sister. Another thing about how we relate to people. Now, this goes back to both the signals and the environment. I'm a video person. I love video. I love interacting with video. And I think it's a huge opportunity for us to connect in that way. When it comes to environmental supports and being inclusive and being thoughtful about the people that you work with, think through what you're asking of your team if you have teams. So I want to get into this a little bit and think a little bit about inclusion and think a little bit more about realistic expectations. So the use of video is skyrocketing, and I think it is a powerful, powerful tool. If you have a team who's unaccustomed to going on video, please think about two things. The level of anxiety is already high. The level of performance is already high. I'm going to encourage you to provide resources to help them understand and get comfortable being on video. Because if the brain is really focused on the anxiety of being on video, and we're using that brain power on that piece rather than thinking clearly about doing the work that needs to be done, you could be compromising the quality of the work, but also unnecessarily raising the level of anxiety even higher. I mean, it can be resolved by a few simple things like a 5-minute, 10-minute tutorial, or even a 10-minute blog article on how to show up on video and have it not be about your own performative nature on video. Because this kind of video is different than the kind of video most people are doing, which is just staying connected to the people you work with closely. So I just want you to think about that. If you need a resource, I'll post one in the comments for you. So just type "need video resource" if you want to share a resource with your team. Really quickly, I want to go back to this comment from Jen. So let's go back here real fast. How are you reimagining your environment? Okay, so Jen is working from half of her dining room table as well. Not ideal, but it works for now. Oh, that is so true. Like, there's nothing about our situation that's going to be ideal. And I think part of having the ideals are still valuable, even in a moment where we are choosing. Still extremely valuable because it helps us identify what we need from our environment and what allows us to perform at an optimal level. And when we can't have the ideal, it's going to call us and invite us to think through those level of expectations. And so half the dining room table, if that's what it is, it's what it is, right? We're not picking between the best of choices. We're picking through based on what's going to work and work fine. And so here's this, something I want to chat about real fast. And I am a huge believer in this. C- work is okay. C+ work, B- work, all of that is okay. So typically when it comes to performance and meeting performance expectations, we probably hold ourselves to a really high standard and hold our teams to a really high standard at about 95% to 100%. That would be considered probably very, very good good performance. Performance enough to like move you and bump you up to the next level. The environment in which we're in now requires like the context has changed. The skill set, we're like learning new skills, and we're having to account not only for ourselves and the people in our homes and the teams that we work with and our employees to learn a new skill set. Whether you are a work from home pro like Jen or myself, or someone who's just really starting to work from home, new skill set. Because everything's changed. And so when someone's learning a new skill set, they need scaffolding, they need support, they need prompts, they need an opportunity to learn and for it to not go well. And so performance in a 75% range during this time, I think is great. Particularly if we're layering on new ways of communicating, new technology, people were never resourced for it to begin with, and we might be adding on new projects that are in support of the community. Having B- work is awesome. And so that's what I mean about changing the personal expectation, not just in the mindset, but in the performance. That's what I mean about reimagining how the environment can support you. And if it's not ideal, it's not ideal. It's definitely not for, it's not ideal for everyone. And so I loved Jen's comment, and thank you for sharing. And so I wanted to go back to that. Okay, so let's keep going on and talk about these signals. So we're going to relate to people differently. Look for the subtle cues. Everyone's anxiety is on high. If you are requiring your team to work on video and they're not accustomed to it, if you're requiring them to join video conference calls and those are new, if you're adding in new communication apps like Slack, provide training. There is so much available on YouTube, provided as a resource. There's so much available written on blogs or on Pinterest. Bring those forward. Also, my personal appeal to you with teams that are taxing bandwidth capacity, to really be thoughtful around how much you're asking your teams to show up on video for video conferences, because depending on how your team is connecting, if they're not resourced, they could be using cell data, like cellular data. They could be using data plans. And even though so many service providers are being lenient and not charging and not taxing, I think it would be an oversight for us not to consider these types of things, specifically as we're thinking about a new way to work once we hit this next phase of life. So that's just a thought for you. Okay, so we've talked through sight, support, and signals. So these are a few like considerations, some mindset things. So then it leaves us with, okay, if we are changing our expectations and setting realistic ones, if we are reimagining how our environment can support us, and if we are changing our micro signals and reading micro signals differently, like how do we actually work from home more effectively? So we have these ideas, and now it's time to get down to brass tacks. And that goes down to setting goals and then prioritizing wisely. Now, there's nothing new here. I just want to set a little bit of context for you. So when it comes to setting goals, even though we have very limited, narrow, shallow line of sight, whether you call them targets, goals, visions, plans, intentions, in this world of so much uncertainty, it's still important to set them because they help us identify what's most important to us in this moment, what's most important in your work, what's most important in how you blend work and life, what's most important as a collective of anyone that's with you in your home, working and living. So if you've set any goals, can you just type one, or just type goals if you've set goals during this time period? For me, I feel like, and I'll be totally honest, the goals that I've set are almost nil. It is getting through day by day. It is, and like I'll put things on my calendar. I'm trying to manage through the work stream, but even yesterday, how I am thinking through the next 4 to 5 weeks has continued to change. But I think the exercise for me continues to be valuable because it continues to reaffirm what's most important in the work that I do, what's most important in my professional partnerships, and what's most important in my home. But the second thing to remember is to think, okay, we have these goals with no line of sight. It's also going to be important to prioritize wisely. And when I think about like the wisdom of people who know things, right? I think about storybook characters, movie characters. I think of a wise old owl or a wise master. They are not quick to react. They often aren't the first to speak. It's almost as if they sit back and then they interject with a lot of slowness, like Yoda. That the wisdom comes with time and clarity, and depending on your experience working from home or your experience in contextualizing and recontextualizing and reprioritizing, the clarity is going to be different, right? I think of a three-way light bulb. There's like ambiance, there's reading, and then there's off. Or I think of a light bulb on a dimmer setting. When it comes to the clarity that we have, it may never go to full brightness and it may be flickering in and out. Our level of clarity changes and we can just prioritize with the wisdom or with the information we have now. So while it's important to set goals, be open to throwing those goals out the window based on the line of sight, based on your environmental support and the signals or the cues. And keep planning and replanning and replanning. I think we are used to it as working professionals because there is no crystal ball in the work that we do. Oftentimes, maybe we're so close to things and so close to our lives that we're not as quick to use the professional genius you have and apply it so close to home. You're genius, Jen, and you should know it. Even in this whole concept of setting goals and prioritizing wisely, my sister's with us. She is really good with movement and self-care. And so I used her to crutch on and move my body yesterday. And I was joking that, like at the end of this, we're going to be like these bad babes. And I was laughing so hard. And, even in the levity of intention and goal setting, knowing that like the schedule will change day to day, that's just fine. All right. So kind of what's anchoring me and what might be anchoring you is reminding yourself of your values and letting them guide you. Oh, yes. Okay, let's go back to this. And I'm so, so happy May's joined us. Oh, May, I'm so excited you're here. So May says, it's such a challenge to plan with any uncertainty when information is changing so often and so quickly, and never knowing at any given time what resources help is available for small business owner. Oh my God, it is so true. Our notion of planning is different. And so what would it look like? And I'm asking us, like as the three of us together, the two of us together, like really what would it actually look like to plan differently? And how do we reframe what does plan actually mean? If we so narrowly maybe even shorten it and the plan is how do I keep my cool? Or if planning means pulling things off of the calendar or lessening commitments and it's reverse planning, is that the new plan? What I've decided for myself is that my big commitment for the week in terms of planning is just to think about my feet. I know this is like so random, but if I'm feeling like I can't hit my plan, I'm confused, I have no clarity, I'm getting frustrated, I'm trying to do things like this live stream, I'm getting interrupted, business continues to fall through, I keep missing my financial budget by this and this and this and this because the business keeps going away. I have a lot of anxiety. I want to do things I can't. I promised myself my plan was going to be just think about my feet. And when I can think about every single sensation in my foot, that reframes me a little bit to think with a little bit more of a clear head. And I think that some of that is like a skill set of like managing anxiety and giving myself 10 seconds to breathe, but changing through the plan. And I think from a realistic business perspective, I keep going back into my financial forecast. Like, there's some of us that are really analytically minded. And we all have real commitments on a calendar that equate to some kind of liability. I keep going back and looking at it and reshaping. And there's a certain point where, for me, I am starting to pick and choose. And I can't anymore because I can't. And it's left me, and this is just like a very personal experience. It's left me like sitting and like, okay, what do I value and what's my values? And it's going to be different for everyone. And sometimes the values are like, what are the values to the client, or what are my values to the business? It could be like, what are my values with my family? And I'm just letting them guide in picking choices that would otherwise be impossible, no winning choices, because that's what it feels like right now. And so as it's been put into action, or like from a pragmatic perspective, some of the things that I've been thinking about and kind of sharing with a small group of small businesses that I'm guiding, even just in resetting expectations, has been, how do I think about time differently? And anchoring on a thing that we know. Because we don't know a lot, but we already know that we have deadlines on our calendars, due dates, accountabilities, like when bills are due, when terms of contracts are up, when we wanted projects to happen, when tournaments were going to happen, schoolwork was going to be done. We have these original timelines to anchor us. We've been given timelines from schools, and whether on this end of, these are the things that we know to be true, and these are the things that are still up in the air. Like, I tend to ground myself in any deadlines that haven't changed, or throw a whole lot of them out the window. And really right now for myself, I'm grounded by like 4 deadline things that happen every week. And opening up communication where there are other financial commitments associated with deadlines and timing, and starting to create through some contingency plans. And so it may mean, and it has meant for everyone, developing a new sense of time, either where we can't meet in its full form our deadlines, or whether our time gets taken away, or whether we're pushing things out, or if we have to have really good communication and hope, and really hope that we can compel, or the situation can compel a partner to think differently about real financial deadlines associated with a date. Kind of what does that mean? When it comes to me, for me to be thinking through things like my own performance, like giving lots of extension around time. And so for any of us that are managing through with teams, or even trying to compel clients or customers, the way that people use their time is so different. This concept of like starting at 8, ending at 6, or whenever you start and end, 7 to 7, 9 to 5, of taking the weekends off. Everyone is using their time differently. And so moving to or adopting more asynchronicity may be of value. And when we move to asynchronous communication, interaction, transactions, it just means everything takes longer. Everything's just taking longer. Another technique that I use, and I fall in and out of it, and when I fall into it, it allows me to just feel better personally, or just trying to feel better and do better, is this concept of positive attention. And, this is a picture of a person reading a book, self-care all day, but thinking through the way that we use the time, the way that we plan, the way that we unplan, how we navigate our environment, how we manage social cues, the work, the setting goals, the prioritizing wisely may actually require time-limited positive attention. So if you have kids, you know this concept. This is the child-directed play. This is like paying attention when these like triggers or cues come up from young children, or even just from anyone that you care for. An elderly parent, a sick family member, pets, like anything under your care, your plants, any of that, your car. When these cues come up, the whole concept of positive attention is if you attend to it in this kind of way, whatever the time limit is and whatever your capacity may be, it helps like bolster and support that bit and provides scaffolding that eventually builds to self-sustaining functionality and a real foundation that can be built upon. And as this learning curve starts to grow and the foundation continues to solidify through positive attention, we can actually pull back. Now, like what that's meant for me in these like early months of school, September, October, November, December, January, February, and then part of March, was I mentioned earlier, like working on my work half-time and half-time with my older son. And it's meant really changing the shape of the work, the expectations of the work. I have the ability to do that. If you don't have the ability to do that, this is where this inclusive piece of communicating, partnering even to someone that you report into, we've been invited and called to do that. That communication may be this perfect opportunity to say, hey, it's different. How I'm attending, how I'm using time is different. And positive attending to the work when you're able to, and positive attending to the children when you're able to, or picking things up or down, or attending to your needs versus other needs. This is where this, the way of doing this, there are so many ways of doing this, just as there are ways of people. And then the number of people in your house, like this multiplies and compounds the number of ways that this can get done. But I just offer this as a thing that I'm doing that is working for me in this moment, and it's going to change next month, is time limited positive attention. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 2 minutes. To my work, I might get a solid hour. I might get a solid 90 minutes. To my work, I might get 3 hours, or no time at all. But I found for myself in a programming perspective that piece, if I'm just like temporarily turning it off and shutting it down, and I expect that of myself, I can set expectations for other people and not feel, and just like hone in and not feel as bad. It's a strategy that I've been teaching some of the other professionals that I support too. We've been working on it for the past couple months, and thinking through managing time. And this is, again, it's just like one skill set to add on. So if you have ideas, oh yes, let's do this. Huge props. May, okay, small business owners, huge props for May, huge props. She's also a small business owner. Huge props to small business owners who have kids and now also need to devote some of your working day to helping them with remote learning. Yes, not just from a perspective of whether you've been called, I'm just like crossing my legs here, like I'm in a circle time at school, whether you've been required by your school to do distance learning, or whether, like in our situation, there's a lot of equity issues in providing distance learning. And so we're given suggestions and lessons, whether in that whole extreme, even just like the sheer logistics of it. who gets to be on the computer. Some of the work, it's not all accessible. Providing support in time, managing through meal schedules, managing through questions, supporting scaffolding prompting. Huge props to all small business owners. Huge props to you, May. This stuff is really, really challenging. And, whether someone was positioned for it to begin with or never positioned at all, we're just like embarking on new territory. Yeah, this is challenging. And one of the things too, May, that I've been turning to is I don't teach from home. I don't have homeschool skills. So two of the pieces of advice that came to me from people who help families transition from a school system to homeschooling was those homeschooling resources. So thank you for the internet and thank you for homeschool adults sharing that. Was also looking through statewide expectations on grade readiness for your child, because we have resources, but every student is unique and every need is unique. And that's like the beauty of people and the beauty of students, but also some of the limitations of working remotely. So I just wanted to share that. Props, small business owners with kids. Okay. So there are just so many ways to think through this, and sometimes our brains cannot be clear. Sometimes we can't mobilize. Sometimes we can't make all the choices. Sometimes our ability to think creatively is really, really limited if we're depleted. But there are creative thinkers out there, and creativity solves a lot of problems and also sees new opportunities. And I know for myself, I'm seeing things in a different light that I'm going to carry with me forward. But some of the things that have been really helpful is, I'm quite limiting my research, but some of the things that have been really helpful in time management has been Pinterest and looking through some blog articles and some teacher resources, as to May's point, if you have children at home. And I think with all things, when we're learning on this learning curve, it is going to be try it, see how it goes, and then iterate, and try it and see how it goes and iterate. I saw this, and I'm going to remind myself of this all the time. 10 keys to success. Number 0, there is no easy or guaranteed recipe. Number 11, someone else's path to it will not be yours. And so I love that. That's it. I just love that. So thank you so much for sharing with me, for giving me a way to connect. Hopefully this is a resource that complements what you're doing, what other people are doing. Please feel free to share it. You can share it straight from here on Facebook. Or if you need other resources or want to share it to a team, feel free to message me or DM me here through Facebook at Merchant Method. I can provide that resource that you can share on with your team going forward. Again, I'm at merchantmethod.com. I support small businesses, really specifically retail businesses and maker businesses. Would love to continue to connect with you. But it's become so abundantly clear that there's a lot of similarities with small service-based businesses like Mary's, like mine, and like the organization that Jen works for at Sendel. So let's stay connected. I'm going to stay here for a little longer. If you have questions or want to share comments, let's just go back to here. I like this one. Remind yourself of your values. Let me just go through these comments real fast. Okay. Is there anything? Thank you. Appreciate your time. Next week, I will be here live again next week, Tuesday at 10 a.m. on the 31st with an Ask Me Anything. I'm going to be answering questions from small business owners that have inventory on how to really manage through new channels of selling and how to prepare for those channels of selling. If you're called to join me, I would love to have you. Sending you lots of grace and sending you thoughts of your own lovely feet as we redirect when plans don't go well and we have to prioritize wisely. All right, thanks so much. Have a good day. Bye.